Okay, first let me thank you for the invitation to come here. My paper is entitled, Does Participation Have a Democratic Spirit? And it deals with the role of participation in democracy, whether or not participation can play a role or does play a role in promoting it and reflecting the norms of democracy. And what I argue in this paper is that this is a blind spot in participation research. I'm a political scientist and I do quite a lot of empirical research at the individual and the group level. And studying participation is a very central area within political science. We already know in this general previous research on participation, we have good theoretical and methodological approaches for studying who participates. We can tell you a lot about different forms of participation and who participates in them: gender, age, education, income, ethnicity, those types of aspects when it comes to the characteristics of the who. We can also say quite a lot about why, the motivations for why people participate, how they participate and which forms of participation they use. There's a variety of forms, those that can target more the parliamentary area, those that deal more with civil society, and then other ones that concern using the marketplace, and maybe even yourself as a political project, targeting these type of matters for different reasons. And we're learning now more on, let's call it the so what of participation, whether or not it's effective and how one should measure the effectiveness of participation. Everything from getting other people to understand that this is a problem, the problem definition, that there's agreement on that it's a political problem, other types of institutions and actors be involved in considering that yes, this is a political problem and something has to be done with it, to making policy, to implementing policy, and then the final part of effectiveness, of course, would be the outcomes, whether or not it is making change, societal change in people's lives. But what we haven't really done in this research, which is rich, I hope you understand it's rich now, is to really find ways to study the democratic quality of participation. And that's what this paper is, an attempt to try to start up that type of research. So I offer a few ideas here, questioning whether more participation is always best or good, the more the better, I call it, the more thesis. I also discuss some research results that may show that there is some sort of mobilization of bias, to use an old term in political science, into certain forms of participation, which may include certain types of people, certain who's, and maybe certain why's, if I use that terminology, but then exclude others. And we need to do much more research on that. We've talked about that a bit already today. And this paper, that's what it really wants to get at in a lot of ways. I talk about an innovative attempt to infuse democratic theory with participation research. This is innovative. Participation research has been very, very empirically oriented, positive theory oriented, trying to find operational measures and not really engaging with democratic theory, political theory. But what this attempt shows is that there are, depending on which democratic theory you take as your point of departure, there's different reasons for defending participation, or different reasons for arguing for participation in society or in politics. It could be influence attempts. That would be the liberal or responsive democratic theory. You participate because you want to influence politics. According to participatory democratic theory, it's more self-government. And then deliberative democratic theory, you learn about politics, you learn to understand politics through talking. And that's also a way of participating in politics. And what this innovative attempt also that fuses democratic theory with participation research also shows is that this is good for political systems. So influence attempts, the more influence attempts, the more participation, the more articulated interests that government then can try to aggregate into some sort of collective decision. In terms of self-government, it improves the citizenry. The more you participate hands-on, that type of participation in self-government, you're going to most likely become a better citizen. And then in terms of deliberative theory, talking through politics, learning about politics, maybe learning about the complexities of politics, and maybe why you don't always get your way if you try to influence politics, helps you understand the mechanisms of politics more, how politics works. Maybe it helps you to learn and to become a good loser if you don't get your way always in politics. Pippa Norris would call this learning to be a critical citizen. All of these, in one way or another, help to legitimize political systems. Participation also has the function of legitimizing politics, legitimizing political mechanisms, legitimizing systems. And these theories basically say the more the better. The more the better. The more people do it, the more they're going to learn, the more ideas are going to be out there for politicians to consider. The more they're going to be able to learn about politics, the more they're going to be able to legitimize the political system. But the basis of these theories is, let's call it old school politics. There's an old school political landscape, and this comes up in different presentations. Here, I'm not going to go through this, take time to go through it. But it's the idea that there's a pre-packaged participation opportunities that have been provided by these mass-based organizations. It could be unions, it could be political parties. They tell you how to participate, and they maybe even give you a time slot for participating. In other research, I've called this collectivist collective action, and there's ideas of different elements of this ideal type in the appendix, which is on the last page of the paper. And that contrasts today with the political landscape that we've already discussed today. It's more involved with individualized collective action. That's also a term that I've been using in the past, also discussed in this appendix. A more fragmented landscape. There's greater opportunities for participation. Not all of them necessarily are focusing on the parliamentary reason. So there's just much more that you can do in terms of influence attempts in self-governing, knowledge seeking. Self-governing could even concern working with lifestyle politics or political consumer lifestyle politics. Maybe being a vegan is a way of dealing and participating in politics for different reasons. There could be self-interest reasons or other-oriented reasons. For vegans, in any case, if I say a bit about research results, it's more other-oriented reasons, animal rights, maybe climate change. But vegetarians oftentimes have self-interested reasons for wanting to not eat meat. Health. Health for themselves, health for their family, not the environment and things. So it's rather interesting when it comes to that. So what I do here then, I'm playing with some terms, and you can tell me whether they make you nauseous or not. I started to play with these terms of participation 101 and participation 101. That sounds like a poli-sci class. Participation 1.0 and participation 2.0. And that applies with them. And I also suggest, with the help of some previous research, that there might be different normative base and perhaps even a culture for engagement in these two different types of participation, particularly when it comes to electoral-oriented participation and participation that concerns more direct action and maybe internet activism. Normally typos don't matter, but on one page here they do matter, and that's page 4, and it's the fourth line from the bottom, and I wrote, which tends to be eco-centered. It should be ego-centered. So EGO, that probably will rip up all the comments you've had on the paper. But what this research is showing, if we can use these loose concepts of participation 1.0, participation 2.0, is that they don't sit well together. Sit well together I've taken from an article that actually has gone through a civic group that has older roots connected to Labour in the UK, has also a more collectivist orientation, but also a more individualized orientation. And these two orientations just don't have any affinity with each other. There's not a good handshake there. And it seems that they also, looking at other research, that it's more, that one was more ethnographic, and other research that is based more on an analysis of data from citizen survey, is that they represent different clusters of democratic norms. So I start to wonder whether or not there's a mobilization of bias, and if we're just trying to see that there's two different cultures of engagement or participation that are developing, and what happens when we continue to want to promote more, which is done in so many different governmental and NGO efforts. I think one of the ways of trying to get at this question is more better, and about the democratic spirit of participation is trying to find a way of researching the democratic quality of participation. And what I suggest here is a research approach that asks questions about how well does participation represent or reflect and nurture the norms of democracy. I've formulated a number of different questions that could be called question clusters about this more central question here. You can take a look at page 6. And what this research approach that I'm suggesting does, for one thing, it follows this lead of using theory, political theory, not democratic theory so much, but citizenship theory, particularly newer citizenship theory, and trying to tease out newer norms of democracy. Norms of democracy have been already teased out in past research. They've been used in citizens surveys, for example. And I try to find operational measures for these newer norms that you can find in newer citizenship theory. It could be on ecological citizenship, cosmopolitan citizenship, sustainable citizenship. And I think that these democratic norms that have been operationalized in surveys, they're called citizenship beliefs, ideals, or norms. I call them expectations. They can be used to try to understand the quality of participation. These expectations are important, or these norms are important because they give ideas about why we should participate in politics or in society, and they can shape political behavior, which means they can shape political participation. So let me just say a bit more about that. Hi.
Hi.
On page 7, I start to talk about these operational measures, and then on figure 1, you get the idea of the list of these measures of the democratic norms that have been used to examine good citizenship. They tap different democratic and citizenship theories, and now all of them, even the newer ones that have been developed, that I've developed, have been tapped in surveys. What's good about this, and say, why talk about citizenship norms? We're talking about participation. Well, it has been the case that it's been possible through the survey data to analyze how these norms relate to different forms of participation. And just to give you an idea of how participation is normally measured in surveys, you can take a look at figure 2. Sometimes more items are asked, sometimes fewer items are asked. And let me just say that this data that I have and that other people have can be analyzed much more to penetrate the democratic quality of participation. Fast now, some results to try to answer the question about the democratic quality of participation. Russell Dalton, who has written an excellent book on using a citizenship survey and fusing the norms with participation, will find that what is called duty citizenship, examples would be if you were a good citizen, you pay taxes. We had a discussion about taxes yesterday. You obey laws and regulations. You may accept jury duty in certain countries or military service. You may report crimes, and there's other ways of measuring duty citizenship. But he finds that this type of citizenship, this view of citizenship, this state-centered view of citizenship, the citizen, legitimizing the state in many ways, is related directly to electoral participation. But not to participation that would imply more direct actions, and not to internet activism. So there seems to be something about this way of participating, with the target being the parliamentary arena, that clusters with certain ways of looking at the role of participation. I talk about soldiering citizenship in this paper. And this is, maybe like the more participation 1.0 perspective. It's pre-packaged in a lot of ways. Somebody is showing you forms of participation, and you're doing them. Dalton finds, though, that what he calls engaged citizenship, developing your own opinion, showing solidarity, trying to influence societal issues and other norms of good citizenship, correlate differently with different types of norms of citizenship, forms of participation. Correlate differently with different forms of participation. There are, as studies also show, some difference between people that participate and do not participate. And here it depends on which country you're surveying. It would be wonderful to do a study of voters and non-voters. And you can do that in certain countries where you have a high number of non-voters. You need, to analyze survey research, you need big numbers, the big N's. In Sweden, it's not that case, so we can't do a comparison between if the people that are drawn into, let's say, electoral participation, that type of duty citizenship, participation 1.0, differ from other types of participants. Voting is like 85% or something like that in Sweden, so we can't, it's not good enough to do that type of analysis. But what we have been able to do with the Swedish data is to show that there are differences when it comes to political consumerism, using the market as arena for politics. Boycotting for environmental, political, or ethical reasons, or boycotting, following labeling schemes, or positively, deliberately choosing to buy something for political, ethical, and environmental reasons. And we see that we clump these two forms of political consumerism together. There are differences between these participants and the non-participants in political consumerism when it comes to certain citizenship norms. And what pops out most is what we call solidarity citizenship. Solidarity with other people that are worse than yourself, whether it's in your own country or internationally. So there's a lot more that can be done with this type of research. And I think this is one way of trying to study the democratic spirit or the democratic quality of participation. I think also that it would be possible to apply this type of research perspective or approach in ethnological research, interview research, definitely when it comes to survey research. Also looking at the types of governmental efforts and NGO efforts, if it's to get out the vote or to mobilize into to participation. What is driving them? What types of norms of citizenship are driving them to want people to participate? Have they reflected on this? Or is it just the idea, the more the better? So I think I'll stop there.